people can join as they come through. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, folks, welcome for the last masterclass before Christmas. Thank you for joining us today from wherever you are. It's early morning for some of you in West Australia. Thanks for joining, and for the rest of you, great to have you with us here today on Friday. It's nearly the weekend. I think it's always a good day, isn't it? Just when you get towards that weekend. The last one before Christmas, as I mentioned. Thanks for all of your support throughout all of these masterclasses. We've had some fantastic ones. I'm sure you'll agree. And today's will be, well, actually, I think you're in for a real treat if you've not met Dan before. Dan has been a keynote speaker for us many times over the years and is a fantastic speaker. You're going to really enjoy it. The session that he's going to be talking about, giving feedback with empathy and impact. Who doesn't need that right now? To be working with your teams. Dan has got a huge and varied background. As a mathematician, worked for banks. He then has left and started this organization to help folks like yourself manage teams and be able to kind of lead with empathy. I just wanted to let you know that Dan is actually an avid cyclist. That's not really a giveaway with the photograph in front of you, but he's raised over he doesn't ride that bike. I'd probably feel that would be an achievement. But he's raised over $400,000 for the Hands Across the Water charity, and he's actually going to be doing it again. I think it's a 9-day event. It's a lot of kilometers in a very hot environment starting 2nd of January. So there might be a few mentions of it during it anyway, but yeah, he's a fantastic speaker and a great bloke. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you right now. Dan, enjoy.
Thanks, Ian, and welcome everyone. I'm in Sydney on Gadigal land. I'd like to pay my respects to traditional custodians of the land we're on, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I'm sure it's around this beautiful country. You're all aware of those different heritage that we sort of live on here. Really keen to get diving into this topic, but I just wanted to tell a little story first. I was took my daughter a few months back to a little theme park on the Sunshine Coast, a place called Aussie World, if anyone knows where Aussie World is. And we were there, we were lining up to go on this ride. And it was the big slide, it was called. We lined up, we were lining, and it took ages. And then, of course, she needed to go to the toilet. So we go to the toilet, and then we come back, and we wait again, and we wait again. And after all this time, we finally get to the front of the line, and this happens. She's too short to go on the ride. It's heartbreak, it's devastation. And you might have had this sort of situation happen to you. You get to the front of the line, the child you're with is too short, you're devastated. You turn, don't you? Do you turn to the ride attendant, just desperate that they can do something to help? And of course, what do they usually do? They give you nothing. They just sort of brush you away and tell you to go off to some other ride. And I want to start by talking about that person. I want to start by talking about these people who just have absolute apathy in our workplaces. Do you have those in your workplace? Do you have those people who just don't care? They just sort of turn up and, computer says no, they do their job, but you ask them for something and everything's too hard. These people exist in our workplaces, and the challenge is they can be really damaging, can't they? They can be really, what I call them is that they're stuck in a valley of apathy. These people who just don't care about the work that they do. And when you work around those people, they suck all the energy out of the team you're in. What's interesting, though, is quite often we think that this apathy is a trait of the individual. It's a problem of the person. But I want to suggest to you it's not necessarily always that's the case. There's a whole bunch of factors that drive people into this valley of apathy. Now, if you've dialed in today and think, I'm just going to sit back and listen and not say anything, I'm going to invite you to change that perspective and jump in and add some comments as we go through. What do you think does this? Now, either come off mute and jump in and chat, or potentially pop it in the chat. What do you think causes people to fall into this state of apathy? What do you think it is that drives people to feel like they don't really care about their work? that they just, I just do a job, I turn up, I get the work done, I go home, I get paid, and anything outside of that, I don't care about. Anyone want to jump in? Any guesses? Ian, what have you seen that drives, or Claire, what have you seen that drives a bit of apathy?
I think people get into a rut. I think there's a rut kind of in people's minds, and that rut just continues.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see Ian not being heard, previous experience not being able to achieve their goals due to others not buying in. Yep, absolutely. Lack of passion and engagement. There's a whole bunch of factors. Performance not being recognized in a meaningful way. Who's ever had that happen where you're working hard, you're trying really hard, and you just feel like no one cares? Culture of business, that's a really good one. We let this behavior continue. We encourage this behavior. I remember, working in an organization where if someone tried to do more than they were meant to, others would say, "Hey, stop trying to don't become an overachiever. Tone it back a bit. You don't want to make us look bad." Effort's not incentivized, toxic workplace culture. And so all of these factors, some of them are inside the person, but many of them are outside that person, aren't they? Many of them are actually in the environment. And what we have to be very careful of when these other factors are at play is that sometimes we think it's the person, we get rid of the person, and often that's a hard process in itself. We bring in a new person, and they turn into exactly the same thing. I don't know if you've ever anyone's worked with grads. Grads are never apathetic to start with. They come in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, they'll do anything for you. But very quickly over time, these people can also become that apathetic person. And so part of giving feedback and making sure we have this impact on others is not just to deal with those smaller spot fires and things that go wrong during the day. It's actually to create, as many of you spoke about, an environment that helps us make sure people are feeling their best. People are able to do the work that they really want to do, and people feel motivated and passionate about that work. And as we go through today, I want you to keep that in mind, that this is a process of giving feedback that's important in creating an environment where we can all do our best work. It turns out that if I go back to my little example of the ride, there is a better way of managing that situation. I don't know if anyone's been to Disneyland, but Disneyland have this problem happen to them all the time. Kids will get to the front of the line and they're too short to go on the ride. So what do they do there? Obviously, they can't just say computer says no and brush them away. They also can't just throw them on the ride and hope they don't fall out. So safety is a pretty big issue at Disneyland, and kids falling out of rides is probably not a great thing. So what do they do? Well, what the staff are encouraged to do is to create a magical experience for the kids. So if a child gets to the front of the line and they're too short to go on the ride, they will create a story. Often in character, they'll start to tell them a story about this magical adventure that they need to help with. And they're going to whisk them away. They often take them in hand. They run them to some other ride. They go straight to the front of the line and they put them on that ride because they have to help save the princess, or whatever the story is that they make up. They're empowered to create this special experience. And your people in your organization will face problems. Things will go wrong. These are guarantees, aren't they? Processes will fail, machinery will fail, something will happen, and the standard processes won't work. That it's almost a guarantee. The difference between an apathetic person in that environment and a passionate, empowered person in that environment is monumental in terms of the outcome. And what we really want to make sure is that as we're giving feedback, we're supporting people, we're creating an environment where they can be their best, not an environment where people feel apathetic. Because again, maybe pop it in the chat if this has ever happened to you. Have you worked with someone who, every time they gave you feedback, a little part of you died? A little part of you felt like it was chipped away, it was sucked out, it was, a broken. And I'm sure many of you have done this and worked in these environments where leaders giving feedback actually is about stripping the person down, breaking their soul, and turning them into that apathetic person we don't want in our environments. And, this is a really big problem because we have to have lots of people working together passionately to move us forward. Many of you are probably leading people through projects and change and restructures and all sorts of really challenging changes to their environment. You've probably all heard this phrase about we need to get people on the bus. Has anyone heard that before? You know, we need to get people on the bus. It's an analogy that was spoken about by Jim Collins in his famous book, Good to Great. Jim's a great person, an excellent thinker in this space. And his analogy was we need to get people on the bus. You're either on the bus or off the bus. We're on this project together or not. To me, it's a terrible analogy. I love Jim's work. I love Jim. He's great. But this is a terrible way of thinking about your job of getting your people together and moving them forward. For the engineers out there, you'll probably understand this. Buses don't go faster when you get more people on them, do they? I mean, getting lots of people on the bus doesn't make it go any faster, doesn't make it go better, or in any way does it enhance the performance. If anything, it goes a bit slower. But the main reason why I think getting people on the bus is a problem is what do people become when you put them on a bus? They become passengers. And I'm pretty confident that's not what we need in our organizations. We don't need more apathetic people sitting down, doing what they're told, not really engaged, not caring about the work they do. What we need is passionate people who are driving us forward, looking at those challenges and problems that are always going to pop up, thinking about how can we manage this, how can we support this, how can we do this in a better way. So these are the types of people we really want. And so I want to give you a different analogy to think about leading your teams through these types of challenges that may help to reframe and rethink the way we attack this type of problem. So the analogy I want to share with you and replace the bus with is I want you to imagine you and your team are trapped in the woods. You're in the woods somewhere, you're lost, you don't know where safety is, but you're the leader of this group. So you're in the woods, you're lost, you're the leader of this group, and also you and all of your team are connected together by ropes. You're all connected in this little group. Now your job as the leader is to get us to safety. Now what we know is that you don't really know where safety is. We don't really know the perfect way, do we? We don't have a perfect strategy, but we have to, as a leader, set a direction. And so the first thing we must do as leaders is be very clear on the direction we're going and make sure everyone else is also very clear on that direction. We're heading north, everyone clear, we're going north, great, let's get at it. And this is critical, right? Because in our analogy, we can't walk in different directions. We're all tied together with ropes. We have to be all walking in the same direction. So setting that clarity of direction is critical. The second important thing you have to do as a leader in this analogy is set expectations and hold people to account. We have to be very clear on how we're going to walk together, what speed we're going to walk at, what tempo we're going to have, how we're going to move as a unit. And this is about setting those expectations for, as a team, this is how we make it through this together. And these two pieces are really vital in making sure that we've built this clarity with our people first. We'll talk about this a bit more as we go through, but one of the biggest problems with giving feedback is that you can't hold people to expectations that they don't know. You can't hold people to some standard if they don't know what that is. You can't tell people they've done the wrong thing if you never told them what the right thing was. So it's really important that we have these two factors. I call them conviction to the cause. We all know which way we're going. We're all clear in the direction. We're all clear on the strategy and the way in which we're going to be moving. And then commitment to the team. We're all clear on how we're going to work together here, on how we're going to work together as a team. And we all want to get to the end together. We don't need people running off the front. We're not in a race against each other. We're in this as a one unit. Now, when you have these two factors and they're working well, it's great. But sometimes people will pop up that make it difficult. And some of you might have heard me talk about this before, but I think it's a really important topic because these are the types of people we're going to have to give lots of feedback to. I call them pirates and passengers. So let's unpack what these pirates and passengers look like. We'll start with pirates. So in our analogy, we're in the woods. We're all tied together with ropes. We're walking north. Everything seems to be going fine. And what a pirate does is they start to walk in a different direction. So we're all walking north. They decide to start pulling west. What happens? Well, immediately we get tension, don't we? We get tension on the ropes. You can feel there's a tension, there's a pulling. Who feels it? Everybody, don't they? Immediately you feel this, oh, something's going, we're getting pulled a bit off course. Now, what does that look like in your organization? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but it's things like people who think we should do something a different way. People who think, I don't think that's the right way. I don't think that's the right strategy. I don't think that's the way we should approach it. And I'm going to start just pulling in a different direction. Now, sometimes when you have a pirate in your team, what people think to do is, oh, look, don't worry about it. Just ignore it. You know, maybe Bill's just, let Bill go. Doesn't matter too much. But remember, in our analogy, there's this tension that everyone feels, and we're getting pulled off track. The other thing that you've got to be careful of with pirates is they're very good at recruitment, aren't they? They're very good at recruitment. They don't like to be lone wolves. They often start to talk to others. Might be in the tea room or in the lunch room. They'll say, oh, look, this north business, this is silly. We should be heading west. And they start to recruit others, don't they? Has anyone seen this before? The people who are starting to, have those rumors going around. They start that gossip. They start those conversations. And suddenly you've got 2 or 3 pirates pulling in a different direction. I've worked with organizations where whole divisions and whole teams are pulling in different directions. And when you have this sort of tension forming in a group, it can really pull us apart. So what should you do when you have a pirate? The first thing we have to do is have a conversation with them. You need to go and talk to them. We need to go to Bill and say, hey, Bill, I notice you're heading west. We're all going north. What's up with that? What do you know that I don't know? What's going on? Talk to me. Because there's a few different possibilities, aren't there? One possibility is that Bill knows something that you don't know. He's got some insights, some knowledge, some experience that you weren't clear on or you didn't have. And he's got a really good reason for why we might need to adjust. Remember, we have to be humble as leaders. We pick the direction, but we don't really know if it's the perfect way. So we talk to them and maybe we adjust. That's one of the possibilities, isn't it? We adjust our direction. We're now going a bit more northwest. Bill's back in the fold. We're all working together, all have that conviction again, and everything's going great. So that's the first possibility. The second possibility is you talk to Bill and you find that he didn't understand something. He didn't know something. He didn't understand why we were going north. You have the conversation. Bill says, I get it now. Great, let's go back. And he comes back into the fold. We're going north again and everything's great. There is a third possibility though. The third scenario is that Bill is absolutely confident and passionate about heading west, and you are absolutely adamant and confident that you need to go north. And in that time, scenario, what we need to do is we need to part ways. We need to cut the ropes. We need to help that person to exit. Now, often when I talk about this, and it does come up at times, people think, oh no, is the empathy guy saying we should fire people? Absolutely, I am. But the question is not if we should cut the ropes, it's how we cut the ropes that's important. Because how we treat that person in that interaction is very, very critical to what happens next. What I've seen in the past is when people disagree with the boss, some bosses toss them off and they throw them into the woods. They don't like them anymore. We're not friends with them. And this is a really damaging thing for a few reasons. Firstly, the world's not that big a place. Often when you part ways today, you'll bump into them again in the future, won't you? And the interaction you have in the future will be largely dependent on how you treated them in this moment. But the second reason, and probably more important, is guess who's watching when you cut those ropes? Everyone else in your team, aren't they? Everyone else in your team is really watching to see how you treat people when they disagree with you. Everyone else is watching to know how does this take place? What happens when someone disagrees? And so when we're parting ways with our pirates, we need to be leaders in those moments. What we should be saying with them is, hey, look, I can see how passionate you are about heading west. We're not heading that way. We're heading north. And so I want to work with you on a plan to help you go where you want to go. I want to maybe build a plan. Let's map it out over some time where we're going to help you to get interviews, or we'll look at other organizations or other teams in the organization who are passionate about going that direction. And I'll help you as your leader to go and transition there. Because it is not empathetic to drag people in a direction they don't want to go. It's not empathetic to stop someone following the things that they're passionate about. Empathy as a leader is about making sure we're supporting people to do their best and to be their best and to get the most out of their work experience. So it's a really important thing to remember. When we have a pirate, we have to have a conversation with them. We have to understand what their reasoning is, and we have to work through those three potential scenarios, knowing that sometimes we'll have to part ways. And maybe this has happened to you, but I know I've left an organization working with someone and it's gone really smoothly. We've left on good terms and nothing's been, there's no animosity or any issues there. And when I've worked with that person again in the future, things were wonderful. We still had a good relationship. We had still got along really well. So making sure you part ways with leadership and empathy is really critical in this scenario. I'm going to ask you about your experiences with pirates and passengers soon, but let me just unpack what a passenger is, because these people have a big impact on our teams as well. So let's get back to our analogy. We're in the woods. We're all walking together. We've got a good rhythm going. We're heading north. And then suddenly the passenger turns up. And what do? Well, they just sit down, don't they? We're all walking along in the woods. All the things are going fine. And one person just sits down. Now, what happens when one person sits down? Immediately on the ropes we get lots of tension. Who feels it? Everybody, don't they? Everyone feels the tension straight away. So what should we do when a passenger arrives in our team? What some leaders will do, and maybe pop it in the chat if you are one of these people, what some leaders will do is they think, I'll just pick up the slack. I'll just do the work for them. Did anyone ever fall into this trap? I'll just do a little bit extra. Oh, are we frozen? No, we're not frozen. Sorry, I wasn't sure. Yep, there we go. You're moving fast. You're so still, I couldn't tell. Some leaders will say, look, I'll just pick up the slack for my team. Has anyone ever fallen into this trap? I'll just do the extra work for them. I'll just, make sure we can still keep things going. Can I suggest to you that this is a terrible, terrible thing to do as a leader? Now, I'll just unpack why. You shouldn't have capacity to do their work. You shouldn't have extra time just sort of lying around that you can do their work for them. There's a good chance if you start doing their work for them, you're going to stop doing some of the critical leadership stuff that you should be doing. You're going to stop doing some of the other things, or you're going to burn yourself out. And so this is bad, but it's not the worst reason why you shouldn't do their work for them. Because the real question is, how does everyone else in your team feel when you do their work for them? They'll immediately feel like this is not fair, won't they? I mean, this is unfair. This person is sitting down. They're not doing their work. I'm working really hard. We're getting paid the same. This person's not doing their work. And you're going to do their work for them? That's not fair, does it? Is it? When we push our people into this sense of, well, this is unfair, it puts a real conflict for them, doesn't it? It creates a real issue for our best people. Now, there's a few ways that our best people will manage this situation. One way is they'll think, well, if that person's going to sit down, I'll sit down too. Now, in your organization, this might look like turning up late, not doing work on time. One that I know is very common is people who seem to go to the bathroom 7 or 8 times a day for 15 to 20 minutes at a time, sitting, always take their phone, just so happens. You'll see these people in your workplaces, won't you? They'll drop the standards of the team. And when one person does it and you don't say anything and you try and do the extra work for them, others will say, well, if they get away with it, why not me? If they're going to sit down, why don't I? And I have met many leaders who complain that they do so many hours, they work all the time. A good friend of mine said this to me, oh, I'm doing so many hours, I'm working so hard, my team are slack, they just don't do their work properly, I've got to do all this extra work. And I turned to my good friend when she told me, and I said, it's not their fault, it's yours. Your job is not to do their work, your job is to be the leader, and that's where you're failing. So as leaders, we cannot try and pick up the slack ourselves, because the other way our people will deal with this sense of unfairness, our best people, they'll say, if this is the standards here, I'll go somewhere else, won't they? Our best people will start to leave, and we'll be stuck with all these passengers, dragging them along, complaining about them. And I'm going to suggest to you, it's not their fault. It's our fault as leaders for allowing this to happen. So again, when we have a person or a passenger arrive, we must take action. We cannot let our people drag these people along. We have to have a conversation. We have to be clear on what the standards are. We have to work with this person to say, hey, look, you're not meeting the standards. And we're going to talk about feedback and how to give that feedback soon, but it's important we understand this context. We're going to have a conversation with them around what the standards are, why they're not meeting them, and how can we get them back to meeting those standards. Sometimes it'll be skills we'll need to develop, won't it? We'll need to build a plan to build some skills so we can develop these skills and help them through. Sometimes it might be that they just don't want to meet those expectations. And in those cases, then we may have to part ways with them. Sometimes it'll be that they're not passionate about it and they want to do something different, and we can build a plan to help them to move into those different ways. But we cannot let our people drag passengers along. It's absolutely critical, because we need to realize that we accept bad behavior. It's us who are playing a role in destroying the performance of that team. And some of you might be thinking, I know this is a big issue, particularly now, that that's all well and good, but I can't afford to lose people. Is that on the minds of anyone? I need the head count. I can't possibly afford to let anyone go. It's so hard to get people at the moment. We just need warm bodies. Let me suggest to you that you don't just need warm bodies. You need passionate, driven people. And again, you might have been in a team like this, where working in a team where when one person left, the rest of the team go, thank goodness for that. Has anyone been in that situation? Someone leaves and everyone else breathes a big sigh of relief. And what happens to productivity afterwards? It goes up, doesn't it? Because the tension's been released. We can all now focus on doing the work that we need to do. So if this is something that you've experienced, I'm going to get you to share some of this, but it's really, really vital that we step into this space of, as a leader, part of our job is setting clear expectations, setting the direction, and then making sure those expectations and directions are upheld. We need to look out for these pirates and passengers, because they can put a lot of tension in our team really, really quickly. Let's maybe open it up and see if anyone would like to share who's experienced a pirate or a passenger pop up in their workplaces. Claire, I can see you're looking at Ian. I'm sure he's one of these two characters. It's
I'd have to ask my colleagues, I guess.
yes. They do arrive though, don't they? We find them. Pirates and passengers are a real challenge that we have to manage as leaders.
Definitely. I think most organizations experience them. Any other folks here who would like to kind of share that stuff? I think Robert took his. Is that Robert? Do you want to say something? No. No. I thought you just took yourself off mute. I thought you were going to speak.
I would, Dennis, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think every workplace has both these, and I'd go as far to say we've probably been these at one point or time in our career.
Thank you, Dennis, because that's a really important point. It's a really important point. We've probably all been a pirate or a passenger at some stage. And the reason why this is an important point is, again, we need to change our mindset when we think about these characters, that it's not necessarily that that's a bad person. This is something we sometimes struggle with, particularly around feedback, is we think, oh, if I tell that person, then they're going to feel like they're a bad person. That's not what we're saying. They just might not be the right person for this role right now. And I think that's a really important call out, Dennis, that, if we've been one of these people, we know that it's not fun. We know that it's not great to be the outsider. We know it's terrible when you're working somewhere and you're failing. And this is why, even though parting ways sounds harsh and people don't like the idea of it, it's not empathetic to drag someone along when they're failing. It's not empathetic to let someone struggle or feel like they're doing something they don't want to do. It's not empathetic to allow these people to suffer and fail. And for some people, I often work with public sector people. They'll say to me, oh, that's all well and good, but you can't fire people in the public sector. And some of you might be thinking, oh, yeah, I know it's really hard to exit people from an organization or business. And I want to just talk about that a little bit, because it can be, but it's never impossible. And it's actually the way we as leaders manage these situations that makes all the difference. So what I have seen happen, and again, you might have seen this happen before, is someone's performance will be substandard here. They won't be meeting expectations here. And no one says anything. We just sort of let it go. And so that no one says anything, and it just sort of drags on and drags on. They keep doing it. Everyone sort of complains about them behind their back, but the leader doesn't say anything. And then somewhere down here, they do a performance review. And this person gets told they're not meeting expectations. And at that point, this person thinks, what are you talking about? I've always done it this way. Have you seen this? And that person gets upset then. I think, what's going on? Why am I getting picked on? I've always done it this way, and no one said anything before, and now you're telling me I'm doing the wrong thing. And then time keeps going. Nothing happens. They keep doing the same thing. And then somewhere way, way down the track, someone says, okay, you're not meeting expectations, and now we're going to do the performance management process. Now, in most organizations I've worked with, and this is really common, when you say performance management process, what you mean is we're firing you, and we're just going to do it over a long and protracted time frame. It's a horrible and painful process. And, at that point, this person's already felt like it's been unfair for a really long time. And so what do? They'll almost always dig their heels in. They'll make it really hard for you. They'll make it difficult. And then, of course, we see leaders who go, oh, well, can I just do a restructure? Can I just boot this person sideways or try and give the problem to someone else? And it's a horrible experience for everyone involved. The reality is most performance management processes, and I'm sure your organizations will have one, they're designed to start way back up here. When the first noticeable underperformance is happening, that's when we should start the process and have a conversation with them and start to map out what is a pathway for them to either return to performance and be part of the team again, or to exit the organization. One of the best questions you can ask a passenger in particular is sit down with them and say, hey, I want to have a chat, but before we dive into this, can I just start, do you really love working here? Like, are you really passionate about it? Very rarely will you find a passenger who'll say, oh, yeah, I really love it here. They'll almost always go, no, not really. It's just a job. And at that point, you can say, okay, well, let's have a chat. What do you really love? What are you passionate about? What do you really, really, what lights you up? What gets you excited? And as a leader, then you can say, well, how can we build a pathway for you to get to there? Ian, I don't have access to the breakout rooms, but can you just make me the co-host? I might get people just to jump into the breakout rooms and have a quick chat if I can. Is that possible?
I haven't got access. Is it just can you speak for 2 minutes and I will look at it, see if we can make it happen?
That's okay. Yeah,
okay.
It should be just maybe it's Chris. If you just make me the co-host, I should be able to do that. But this is a really important place for us to dive into, because, as you said, Dennis, these people exist. Sometimes we've been those people. You're probably all thinking right now, oh, yeah, I've got a couple of those, and their behaviours come to mind really quickly. And too often we don't talk about it. Too often we just try and ignore it. Too often we pretend that there's no issue. And we need to have these conversations. We need to talk about these people, because as soon as that tension arises, everyone in your team feels it. Oh, I think I've got it now. Let me just. Maybe we don't have breakout rooms. That's okay. We'll keep the conversation going together. We don't talk about these people. If we ignore these people, they don't go away. And that frustration almost always continues to build. So it's really important. I want to really encourage you, when you come across these pirates and passengers in your team, don't turn a blind eye. Don't ignore them, and you make sure you talk about them. Dennis, you're off chat.
Yeah, sorry, Dan. The other thing, passengers in particular, it could be external influences that are causing that behaviour or leading to that behaviour. So it's
absolutely
as part of being a leader, knowing the struggles that your people are going through. And I know you said before, it's not our place to carry the rest of the team or carry people, but people do experience things in their lives where they do need a bit of a lift up and a carry through till they can get on their feet again. But without that initial conversation, if you ignore it, then it becomes a behaviour.
Absolutely. And again, it's a really good point, Dennis. We need to be aware of what's going on. We need to take them aside and go, hey, what's happening? And we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But, the silent frustration that some people have as a response, the talking behind their backs, we'll give them a smaller job, we'll push them into a corner somewhere, we'll make this person the head of staplers and tuck them in a room and try and hide them away. All of these things, it's not leadership. It's damaging to the person, it's damaging to the team, and it creates a lot of issues. So, giving feedback is not just a nice thing to do. It is a vital part of leading a high-performing team, and it's something I really want you to see as a critical part of your role. Having that vision that my job here as a leader is to set that direction of where we need to go and how we need to achieve what we're going to achieve, and then hold people to these expectations and create those standards within my team. So let's. And this is the key point here. Some of you might be thinking, oh, look, I don't lead a big team. Maybe it's someone else's job to do this. The boss should do this. And often I work with people. They say, oh, but my boss should do this course, and my boss needs to learn these things. All those things may well be true, but leadership isn't a title. Leadership isn't a role. It's not a job. It's not a sitting in an office or whatever else you think it might be. It's an action. It's behaviors. It's things that you do. And in the highest performing teams, feedback is given by anyone and everyone. And one thing I definitely suggest to you is, if you aren't giving feedback upwards to your leaders and your boss and the people who you work with, then you're robbing them of more information and more understanding of how they can do a better job. And giving feedback is a leadership behavior, and it's something we all need to do much, much more of. So just on feedback, and again, its importance, this might be an obvious question, but why do we feel pain? I'm pretty sure everyone feels a bit of pain. If you put your hand on, say, something really hot, you feel pain, don't you? Why? What's the point of that? Why do we do that? Well, the reason we do it is it's a feedback loop, isn't it? It's your body giving you feedback on how it's interacting with the world, right? Your hand's on the hot plate, it's burning, it's doing damage, and so nerve endings in your hand send a signal to the brain to say, stop doing that. Change your behavior. The behavior you're doing at the moment is causing damage, stop it. And it's a really important mechanism. There are a small number of people who are born with a condition where they can't feel pain. And it's incredibly hard. You would never wish this on your worst enemy. People who can't feel pain will often cut themselves and not know. They'll burn themselves and they can't tell. And it's incredibly traumatic. When you're not getting that feedback, you can do a lot of damage to yourself. And I want you to think about this in terms of the context of your team. If someone is doing something that's doing damage to them, their career, their future prospects, or to the team, they're doing damage to the team's performance, then not giving them feedback is pretty horrible, isn't it? Not giving them this information will mean they'll do much more damage and not know about it. And so we want to make sure that we understand feedback is a vitally important step in the process. Now, there's sort of 4 ways that I think about feedback. Obviously, it can be either encouraging feedback, positive feedback, or corrective feedback, hard feedback. I'm going to talk about both of these. And also, we need to remember feedback is something that we both give and receive. So let's just talk about this a little bit. When you're receiving good feedback, you should feel proud. I don't know if this happens in your workplaces, but a lot of places in Australia, we tend to brush it off a little bit. No, just doing my job. No, not a big deal. I don't want to make a song and dance about it. We sort of, anyone find that happens in your workplace? People, it's just, we just got the job done, and we don't take this pride in the good feedback we get. Can I suggest to you that you're letting yourself and others down by not accepting that positive feedback? You imagine an AFL coach that when someone kicked a goal said, hey, no high fives, no celebrating, just get back to halfway. Ian, I'm sure if Sunderland score a goal, you don't want the manager going, hey, stop clapping. Everyone in the crowd, stop that. We're just doing our job. Of course not.
Just doesn't happen. Doesn't happen very often, unfortunately.
That's right. But, you want to feel that sense of pride. And you want, as a leader, share that with your team and share that sense that we're doing a good job. Now, when you're receiving corrective feedback, you should be happy. If someone's telling you that you're doing something that isn't right, you're doing something wrong, or you're creating some damage, you should be happy to learn that information. It might not feel good in the moment, but you should be happy, because the alternative is you do the damage and no one tells you, and it was much, much worse. So when you're receiving feedback, if we want to be the people that give feedback well, we have to be willing to receive feedback well. And we have to be proud when we get good feedback, and we should be happy when we receive corrective feedback. And I just want to sort of focus on this a little bit more, because the way in which we think about this, the way in which we interpret and show up when we're giving feedback is important. These 3 words are very simple words, but the order we put them in is often very instructive. Sometimes we feel a little bit helpless in our workplaces, don't we? And we think about them. You might have met someone who talks in this way. They'll say, oh, look, when I have more time, when I have more money, when I have more resources, then I'll do the things that I really should do, and then I'll be successful, happy. I'll be the sort of leader I want to be. And I call this the helpless mode, because it always relies on something out there, the world, magically shifting and changing just to suit you, doesn't it? Has anyone found people like this? Oh, when I have more time, that's my favorite, when I have more time. Turns out there's exactly the same number of hours in every day. Has been and always will be. It's never changing. You always get the same amount of time. So we've got to take ownership. We're not going to get more time. The second way I see people is this sort of hustle culture, the fighter mode. Do. I'm going to do more. I'm going to stay up late. I'm going to sleep less. I'm going to work Elon Musk hours or something stupid like that. And then if I do all those things, then I'll have some wins. I'll have some successes. Then I'll be the happy, successful leader I want to be. Personally, I find this incredibly exhausting. I also find that the most of the time, the people who can sustain this for any length of time tend to be psychopaths. And for the rest of us, we tend to burn out, don't we? It's not sustainable. And this fighter mode tends to drive people into some pretty dark places. So the way I want you to think about showing up as a leader is to start with who you're going to be. What attitude will you bring? How are you going to show up? Now, who you decide to be will impact what you do, and that will impact the outcomes you'll have. Of all the things in the world you can control, there's not many. The number one thing you can control is how you show up, what your attitude is. I remember when I lived in Sydney, I used to drive home from the city quite often, and as many of you will know who live in Sydney, the traffic's just amazing here. And so after wrestling through traffic for an hour or so to get home, I'd get to the end of our street, and at the end of our street, the street I lived in, there was a big tree, and that big tree was always my my time when I'd ask myself a simple question. I'd say, Daniel, you're about to walk through the front door at home. On the other side of that door is, your wife and your daughter. So what attitude are you going to walk through that door with? Are you going to walk through the door frustrated and annoyed about the traffic? Are you going to walk through grumpy about a meeting that didn't go well? How do you walk through that front door? Because I know however I walk through the front door changes everything that happens on the other side, doesn't it? And you'll probably experience this as well. Who's ever found themselves rushing from a meeting to meeting, and something's gone wrong, and they're grumpy and they're tired, and they walk into the next meeting, and of course that meeting doesn't go well either, does it? And we like to blame it on something else, but really as leaders we have to take accountability for how we show up. And so I really want you to remember, if someone's giving you feedback, you should be pleased with that. You should start with a sense of, well, I'm interested, I'm curious, and I'm thankful that you're giving me this information. If you're tired and grumpy and overworked and someone gives you feedback, you'll probably respond in a different way, won't you? And, our attitude is so important in this space. If we're going to either receive or give feedback, we have to be able to manage how we show up, because our actions have a big impact on those around us. The next part of this, I'll keep moving through, is this idea of how that actually plays out in real life, how that plays out in the way in which we interact with others. So often we feel like this is the way the world works. People out there say, do, and act in certain ways, the orange stuff, and then we react to that. And you'll know the people who think the world works this way. They'll say, well, I'm angry because you made me angry. Or I said those things because you said those things. Do you know someone who does that? They're always blaming someone else. In their view, the orange stuff is the problem and the orange stuff needs to change. Unfortunately, the reality is you're going to run into jerks. You're going to bump into people who do say and act in ways that you don't like. It's a guarantee, isn't it? There are going to be things in your world that people who will do things and they'll make you upset. But it's not about how we react, it's how we respond. And so what we need to accept is, yes, people out there will say, do, and act in certain ways, but the critical piece is I interpret what they say, do, and act, how they do these things. And I interpret it through a few lenses. One is, what are the beliefs or ideas or views I have, my mental models that I use to understand that person's behavior? And the second is, how am I feeling at the moment? What's my mood? Now, if anyone else is a parent out there, maybe just give me a little yes in the chat if this applies to you. If you're a parent, then you've probably had this experience where your child has asked you something several times, and because you're a bit grumpy, tired, in a mood of some state, you respond in a way that, on reflection, you're not particularly proud of. Anyone ever found that happen to them? Are we all perfect parents in this group? Otherwise, we all do it. We've probably done it with our partners. Ian, I know you've done it with Vanessa. Someone will say something, and because of our mood, we respond in a way we're not proud of. We need to take ownership for that. We need to recognize that, hang on, how am I feeling at the moment? And do I want to respond in that way? If someone's giving you feedback and you're grumpy and tired and you feel like it's unfair, maybe just pause and think, is it really unfair? Or is it just the way I'm interpreting it? Is it because of something in me? And this is a really powerful skill for us to learn, because when we realize that we choose how we respond, it gives us great power. There's this beautiful quote by Viktor Frankl. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. You will have challenging situations at work all the time. You'll have lots of issues pop up. You'll have people who say and do things that you wish they didn't. All of these things are guaranteed truths. We have to accept they're going to happen, and there's no way around it. The only thing that we have to make sure we control is how we choose to respond to those situations, what action we choose to take. And this is not easy. Easy to say, hard to do. But if you've been in a situation where someone has said things to you and you just blame it on them, I need you to understand that we can do things differently if we choose how we respond to those situations. So I want to talk a little bit about good feedback, encouraging feedback, before we dive into giving hard feedback. Again, just as a sense check, who thinks that they give lots of encouraging feedback to their team, that it's always there's positivity and all the wins are shared all the time? Is anyone in that state, or is most people in the usual state, which is we just get on with it and do our jobs? Giving encouraging feedback is such an important thing that we need to do, and it's one of the most underrated roles, I think, in leadership. I just want to touch on a few pieces about it, though, just to be aware of. One, make sure you're giving positive feedback on behaviors and actions and not just results. You need to give positive, encouraging feedback on behaviors and actions, not just results. The reason why is because if you just give feedback on results, some people will find ways, shortcuts, bad behaviors to get those results. Has anyone ever seen this? Some people will cut corners. Some people will find ways around. Some people will break the rules to get the good results. And if you just focus on results, sometimes you'll give lots of encouragement to people who are actually doing the wrong thing. If you're not sure of this being true, open the Banking Royal Commission website and have a read about some of the wonderful things that our people in financial services were doing, terrible behaviors, but they were making lots of money. They were getting great results. They were getting big bonuses. They were getting the encouragement. Now, in your team, it won't look the same. It'll look different, and you'll have to manage that in different ways, but make sure that you're not just giving feedback on the numbers, because otherwise people will break the rules, people will find a way around it. The second piece here, timely and small can be much better than waiting. Often I'll hear leaders say, "Oh yeah, I've got a one-on-one with that person in next week, so I'll let them know then." Why are we doing that? Why are we waiting? Well, why wouldn't we just tell them straight away they're doing a great job? Why wouldn't we jump in with something small and let them know? Often, we think that the way that we should encourage people is some big award or prize or some money, and actually that's not what really drives people when they're in this. They're looking for this encouragement. And I just finished a degree recently in behavioral economics, and there's some really good research around this that brings this to life now. This guy is Dan Ariely. He's a brilliant behavioral economist out of Duke in the UK, Duke University in the UK, US. And he did this amazing study looking at what drives performance, what factors drive higher productivity in teams. So much like some of you, they had a group of different teams in the same job in an organization. And they tested these 3 ways of giving them a bonus, and then they measured productivity to see what the impact would be. So the first group, they gave them cash. If they hit their targets, they got money. Pretty standard, isn't it? A lot of organizations will do that. Great. The second group, if they hit their targets, they got a voucher for a pizza, big family-sized pizza on the Friday after. They got a voucher, right? Great. The third group, if they hit their targets, they got a handwritten note from the boss congratulating them and thanking them. So they ran this experiment, and over a couple of weeks, they were monitoring the productivity of these teams against the baseline. Now, what was really interesting is after a short amount of time when they measured, they found that one of the 3 was lagging the other 2. Now, all 3 of them, the productivity was higher, but one of them was a little bit lower. It was the cash group. So still better than the baseline, but the handwritten note and pizza were sort of out in front, and then the cash group and then the control. And they thought this was quite interesting. So they continue to measure over a longer period of time. And after a longer period of time, something extraordinary happened. The productivity of the cash group dropped below the baseline. Let me just repeat that. So the productivity of these people who we're giving a cash bonus to has now dropped below the productivity of the group we're giving nothing to. Why is this happening? Now, I'm sure some of you are probably sitting there thinking, who are these idiots? Give me the money, I'll take it. And, you'd be happy if someone gave you a financial bonus. But I'll open it up. Does anyone want to have a guess on why this might be happening? Why might giving people a cash bonus actually be reducing the productivity of the team? It seems strange, doesn't it? Do you have any guesses? Let me have a look at the chat. No guesses? Okay, well, let me unpack it for you. Turns out the part of our brain that really drives productivity, the part of our brain most responsible for motivation, for discretionary effort, is actually the subconscious part of our brain. Now, your conscious brain, your thoughtful brain, it goes, sure, money sounds great, I'll take it, I can spend it on lots of things. But your subconscious brain doesn't really care about money unless it's unfair. Then it really cares. If anyone's been in a workplace where they found out the person next to them or the person with a very similar role to them got paid 50 grand a year more than you, what immediately are you worth? You're immediately worth $50,000 more. And until you get it, it's upsetting, isn't it? It's unfair. If I'm not getting paid what I think I deserve and it's unfair, my subconscious brain really cares about it. As soon as I hit the fair line, anything else, it doesn't care that much. It doesn't drive extra motivation. Actually, what happens in this group was that they were getting this bonus. So they're getting the bonus now and they're getting more, and that was great. And what happened to the fair line? Well, the fair line just moved up to there, didn't it? Suddenly, this is what they deserved. They deserved to get the bonus every week. And then one week when they missed their targets, they got paid this much. And people started going, well, that's unfair. Who stuffed up? Whose fault was it? Must have been you, Ian. I think you must have stuffed up. How did you let the team down? And soon what happens is productivity starts to fall because everyone's worried about all of these infighting and other things instead of working on doing their job and doing it well. So be very careful with this idea that cash is going to be the thing that drives productivity, because scientifically we know it's not necessarily true at all. And this has been replicated in studies through Google and studies through Facebook and other big organizations, that just paying them cash gets you a small bump initially, and then it actually can create more problems. Now, out of these three, in the long term, what they found out was that the handwritten note was a clear winner. Handwritten note drove productivity higher consistently over a long period of time. And let me maybe ask the group and pop it in the chat if you have. Has anyone ever received a handwritten note or a card or something like that from a boss? Has anyone ever been given something like that from a leader to say thank you? I don't mean like an email or a text message. I mean something sort of thoughtful and meaningful. Often when I ask people this,
we get the Christmas card.
Christmas card, is it a handwritten one?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. And so, Henry, you haven't. Let me ask you, Dennis, do you often keep them?
Until my wife finds them and throws them out, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because often when I ask people, they often don't throw them out. I've worked with people who've said, oh, yeah, 10 years ago I got a letter from a boss and I've still got it. I'll keep it forever. Now, the reason we do these things is because they're meaningful. It's something that your subconscious goes, this is a way that someone has shown me that I matter, that I care, that my performance is important. And so, Henrik and others, if you're thinking, how can I drive motivation and productivity in my team? Here's a really quick win for you. Right? When someone does something really good, go to the bookshop or something, go to the newsagents, buy a card, write in it, sit down, handwrite it, and go, thank you. And it's a brilliant way to drive the right behaviors too. You can say, Ian, love the way you handled that tough situation the other day. Really highlights how awesome our behaviors are, how your behaviors are. Really highlights what we do around here. Excellent work, mate. Really well done. It'll cost you almost nothing, won't it? And while some people say, oh, look, I don't know if they'll care if I write them a card, I can guarantee you we know that they will. So it's a really good way of giving positive feedback. As I said, be careful about thinking money is the thing that drives productivity, because it rarely does. And it's a really simple tool that you can use. Now, in your organization, maybe it's not a handwritten note. Maybe it's giving them a Friday afternoon off if it's their kid's birthday. Maybe it's giving them something else that they really like. And maybe they have a particular type of food that they like or something. And it's about doing things that are meaningful and make people understand that you care about them, you understand them, and you know them. And this is something that's really important. I am going to shift gears, though, and start talking about the other side of feedback, giving hard feedback. Now, again, in the chat, I just want you to put a number in for me. Out of 10, how much do you love when you have to tell someone they've done the wrong thing? How much do you love giving hard feedback? So 10 out of 10, love it. I actually like when people do the wrong thing, just so I can go and have a chat to them about it. 1 out of 10 is, I hate it. I fear it. It's the worst part of my job. I wish I didn't have to do it ever again. Let's have a look. 0s, 1s, -10 from that. 5. Okay, James, you're highest at the moment with 5. Okay, good. Well, the good news is we're in the right place. It isn't something we love to do, but as we've sort of built up throughout the morning on this, it's absolutely critical we do it, isn't it? It's one of the fundamental jobs for us as leaders is to give hard feedback. And while we don't like it, and -10, Matt, that's a ripper. While we don't like doing it, it's absolutely critical that we do. So let's spend some time getting you really comfortable around what we need to do as leaders in terms of giving feedback. All right, so yes, it's a teachable moment. Let's call it that. We often find these ways to describe giving hard feedback to make it sound nicer, but I want to give us some tools to help with it as we go through. So the first thing you have to do is be really clear on your intent and how you're showing up to give that feedback. Now, there's 3 ways I see this often play out: cruel, kind, and nice. Now, what cruel feedback looks like is it's often yelled, it's often pretty direct. Has anyone ever had that with the pointy finger feedback? Desk banging, chest beating. It's not as common as it used to be. It used to be far more common, I think, particularly in some heavy industries, people throwing things and yelling and screaming. It's often pretty ugly and it's not very fun to receive. Anyone ever received cruel feedback? It's not the nicest. It's also generally selfish. Often what is happening when someone is being cruel is it's their emotions, their emotional state that they're trying to unload. Their frustrations, their anger, whatever it might be for them, it's them trying to vent all of that, isn't it? And so it's actually more about them than it is the person they're giving feedback to. Now, as I said, it's not as common as it used to be. Anyone who's been around a little while, I remember my first job, I saw someone throw an ashtray at someone else in an office place. It was not very kind, but it's pretty, it's sort of not as common as it used to be, let's say. Unfortunately, what we've replaced being cruel with too often is being nice. Now, being nice is, no, I don't want to hurt their feelings. Oh, I've got to say something, but maybe I'll sugarcoat it really heavily. I'll make it sort of, I'll wrap it, I'll hide it in somewhere where I'll do everyone know the shit sandwich? I'll say something nice, something bad, something nice, but I'll make the bread really thick. And I'll just have a little slither in the middle. Maybe they won't notice. People walk out of this feedback going, did I just get told off? Am I doing awesome? I can't tell. And the worst manifestation of this being nice is I just won't say anything at all. I'll just let it go. Can we agree that this is also incredibly selfish, isn't it? Being nice isn't about the other person, it's about you. It's about your fear about having it's your emotions, it's you and how you feel about this situation that's creating this outcome. And it's selfish because you're not talking about the other person. Just give me a sense check, those people who had the low numbers, I think it's most people, which of these two do you tend to fall into? Do you tend to fall more into the nice category or more into the cruel category when you're giving feedback? I know some people do the dance where they go nice, 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 and it boils up so much that they jump into the cruel mode. And again, that's Tom, nice, 100%. Cole, nice. Thank you. And again, as I said, this is nice to cruel. Yep, that's the dance, isn't it? It's this is really common. But both of them, both cruel and nice, are selfish. As a leader, it's not your job to be worried about you and how you feel about the situation. It's your job to worry about them. So what we want to think about is when I'm giving feedback, I care about this person. I care about this person. They're doing something that's wrong. They're doing damage to themselves, their future career, to the team, to the performance of the group. They're doing something that that's causing damage, and I need to talk to them about it because I care about them. It's all about them, isn't it? And avoiding that conversation, making that conversation unclear, making that conversation about you, all of these things are wrong. Giving feedback is, we have to start from the place of, I need to help this person. I care about them. I want them to do better. I want them to be their best. I want them to be successful. I want them to be a high-performing member of this team. I have to tell them because it's important for them. And if you're not in that state, if you're going to give feedback and you feel like your blood's boiling or you're a bit worried and you're thinking about yourself, you need to really refocus and make sure you're thinking all about them. Because it's absolutely a critical part of leadership. You are there as a leader to support that person. It's not about you. It's all about them. And so getting into this state is really, really important. And for those people who are being nice or don't want to hurt other people's feelings, it's much, much crueler. Imagine if you put your hand on the hot plate and your hand thought, the nerves in your hand thought, oh, look, the brain's a bit busy at the moment. I don't want to disturb it. I don't want to upset it. I'll just say nothing. What's going to happen to your hand? You're going to do a lot more damage, aren't you? And exactly the same is true in our workplaces. When someone is doing something that is creating tension in the team, that is hurting the performance of the team or doing damage to themselves, us not saying anything is cruel. Us not helping and supporting them is not kind. We have to say something for their benefit. So the big question at this point is always, okay, wise guy, so what do you say? how do you phrase it? What do you do in this situation? How do you make sure people don't feel this sense of being persecuted? And I've mentioned fairness a few times now, and I want to show you a quick video. It's my favorite demonstration of how fairness works in humans, and this is a demonstration in monkeys, but fairness is a really critical thing for us to focus on. So let me just play this quick video for you.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs and with birds and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group, they know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food than you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So final.
Let me just pause that. So who can relate? Anyone can relate to the poor little Kapushka monkey getting the cucumber? And what I find happens so often, we all have the cucumber moments, don't we? We all have those moments where we are told something or someone says something and we feel it's unfair. We feel like it's there's an injustice. Remember, we feel it when we're working really hard and someone else is a passenger in our team. We feel it when we're not getting treated fairly and we're not getting feedback when we should be, or we're not getting that encouragement that we think we deserve. So fairness is such a powerful force that we have to be very, very conscious of. And where it becomes really, really vital is when we start to give feedback. So I want to give you a model, a framework, a little tool, and I'm more than happy to share some other picks with the group so that you can take those away as well. I'll pop them in the chat in a moment. But this is a really simple structure of 4 sentences that we use to give powerful feedback. Now, the first sentence starts with "I noticed." And what we want to do here when we're going to give feedback is we want to start by saying what I noticed and what is the objective behavior we're going to talk to them about. And this is a really important piece when we talk about that idea of fairness. So if I said, "Oh, Ian, I noticed you're being a bit of a jerk." Of course, Ian's going to say, "What are you talking about? Like, that's not fair. You're accusing me of something I don't understand. What are you talking about?" Now, what's often happened in this situation is I've seen a bunch of behaviors, or I've seen some different things, and in my brain, I've packaged them all together and given it a label. But then when I share that with Ian, Ian doesn't recognize that label because he hasn't put them all together in that way. And so when you trigger that sense of unfairness in giving feedback to start with, what happens? Well, the other person puts up a wall, don't they? They immediately reject whatever you've got to say. Sometimes they do it openly. Sometimes they throw the cucumber. But as adults, what we don't do is always make it so obvious. You see, when my daughter, she's 6, when she thinks something's unfair, everybody in the neighborhood knows about it straight away. And what we do as adults when we feel something is unfair is sometimes we hide it. We think, "Oh, you're not going to treat me like that, are you? I'll just take it on the chin now, but there's other things that I'll do later on." I worked with a school administrator, and she said a lady in her team doesn't like one of the teachers. And so when she prints her workbooks, she always turns one page upside down before she staples them in. So there's always an error in there. When we throw the cucumber as adults, we do it in some mischievous way sometimes. So this first sentence in giving feedback is so important. We have to talk about the objective behavior that we're giving them feedback on. So I might say, "Hey, I noticed you were late to the team meeting yesterday." Or, "I noticed you've been late the last 3 team meetings." Or maybe, "I noticed you weren't wearing your safety gear yesterday on site." Or, "I noticed that report that you were going to give me was a couple of days late." It's got to be something very specific and objective that the person can relate to. This is really, really important because in this first sentence, they need to be nodding and agreeing with us. They need to know what it is that we're talking about. As I said, be very careful about bundling things together. If you've seen a bunch of things, then break them down. I'd often suggest pick the most important of those little things and just talk about that one thing. But making sure that you use this objective behavior is really critical. So after the I notice, the second sentence we're going to write is the I imagine. So here, what I want you to do is think about why might that person have done that behavior? In their words, with a bit of empathy. Why might they be doing this? So you might say, hey, I noticed you were late to the last 3 team meetings. I imagine you got a lot on your plate at the moment. What's going on? You might create some space for them to reply. You might let them have a conversation, and sometimes they'll give you some ideas, some excuses, some reasons. Sometimes they'll say nothing. But this is about having that olive branch to say, look, I get it. Things go on. I imagine something's happening. You know, I noticed you weren't wearing your safety gear, and I imagine you're finding it uncomfortable. Making sure that we have that empathy is really important at this point, because when people don't feel like they've had the opportunity to speak, when they don't feel heard, then we can drive apathy. Then people will shut down, and while their little monkey might be throwing the cucumbers inside, they'll often not be listening to what you're saying as you go through the feedback. All right, the third sentence, really important. Too often feedback dies when we say, hey, you did this, and the person says, oh, it was because of this, and then we sort of brush it off. That's not good feedback. We need this third sentence. This is the I think sentence. And this is where we're going to talk about what are the consequences if the behavior continues, what's the damage that they're doing. Because the reality is, if someone's doing something that might cost them their job, when should you tell them? Straight away, as soon as possible, right? If someone's doing something that's creating damage for the team, when should you tell them? Immediately. And you want absolute clarity that they understand what it is that you're giving them feedback on. Hey, I noticed you're late to the last 3 team meetings. I imagine you got a lot on your plate. What's going on? Look, I just want to be clear. I think when you're late to the team meeting, it puts the whole meeting behind. It's pushing the project timelines, putting pressure on everyone else in the team. It actually might make the project run over time and can put all our jobs at risk. I mean, if that's the reality, you should absolutely tell them, shouldn't you? Hey, I noticed you weren't wearing your safety gear. I imagine you find it uncomfortable. But I think when you're not wearing your safety gear, it puts your life at risk, and our whole operation could be shut down because of it. If the consequences are damaging, make sure it's clear that they understand what they are. Don't leave it to chance. The final sentence is now when we're going to start to take action. This is the I want sentence. And so here we want to describe and have a conversation about the different actions that might be needed by yourself and the other person to make sure that things get better in the future. If it's I noticed you're late to the last team meeting, imagine you got it on your plate. Like, I think being late puts the whole project at risk, and it could put our jobs at risk, whatever the case might be. The I want sentence can flex quite a lot. At one end, I might say, hey, I want to sit down with you, look at your diary and all your priorities and see what we can change to make sure you're on time going forward. You might go to the other end of the spectrum. If it's the safety, you might say, hey, I want you to wear your safety equipment every single time, or you're going to lose your job. You can be very directive or supportive and consultative. It's completely up to you, and it depends a lot on the situation, doesn't it? But the important thing to do through this process is to make sure that we're absolutely clear on this specific objective behavior that you're giving feedback about, that they know what it is that you're talking about. Not a group of behaviors, not an attitude. What are the objective behaviors? The I imagine gives that bit of empathy. The I think is being clear that this is unacceptable and why it's unacceptable. And I want is about setting a pathway forward so that we can improve and get better. That could include training, it could include targets, it could include you taking a lot of action as their leader to support them. But it's really important we go through and have this full conversation where we give feedback. Now, what some people fear is that they're going to start every conversation with their team is I noticed, I imagine, and their team are going to think, oh, this again. And so if you're worried about that, that's fine. Change it. Change the words. The words aren't there to be a perfect script, but what I would really suggest you do is make sure when you are going to give feedback to someone, you sit down and think about, what do I need to say? What are the things I need to get off? What do I have to say to this person? And write them down before you go into the conversation. Don't leave it to chance. Don't try and do it haphazardly in the last 2 minutes before the end of a meeting. Take the time to know what you need to say and then say it effectively through the process. Thank you to those in the chat. And so this is something that I'll really recommend you practice, you give it a go. This works perfectly to your staff. It also works well upwards. You know, you might say to a leader or a supervisor, hey, I noticed you didn't come to our team meeting yesterday. You said you're going to come, and I'm actually super busy at the moment. But I think when you say you're going to come and then you don't, it actually makes my team really disappointed. They're really excited to see you, and I'm sure you don't want them to be disappointed. So I want to sit down with you and have a chat about, you know, let's maybe look at a couple of dates when we can make sure you're going to schedule in to come and lock those into the diary. This feedback tool works at home. You know, honey, I noticed you didn't unpack the dishwasher again. I imagine, Ian, don't try that one. It's not going to work for you. But, you know, this is a tool that the more you use it, the more easy it becomes to think through this process. And being good at giving feedback is a vitally important part of the process. Now, I'm going to, in the chat box, hopefully this works. No, I won't. I'll send them through to Ian. You can distribute them to the people who popped up. Maybe I'll send you PDFs which break this down and give you the formula, so you've got those if anyone needs them. But I did want to just make sure we've got some time for any questions, comments, thoughts, discussions. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, oh, that all sounds good, but I've got this pirate in my team or this passenger. How would I deal with it? Happy to open up for any questions and comments before we wrap up for this morning.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we've got 2 or 3 minutes, folks. So if you've got any questions, please speak now. If I have, hold your peace. I would also say more than happy if people have got questions later for people to reach out and send me an email or something as well. Any questions, folks? No? Oh, yeah, here we go in the chat. How can you deal with multiple teams of pirates without clear leadership direction, bringing them together? So, Tom, you're talking about in an organization, you've got a bunch of different teams pulling in different directions and no one seems to be coordinating them. Yes, within a division. Yeah, okay, cool. The ideal, and I think you're sort of alluding, is the ideal is that someone who is the leader of those groups would set that clear direction and that commitment for you. And you've probably seen that doesn't always happen. Now, the challenge here is often people go, oh, well, it's a failing of leadership because of that person. But I would invite you to think about it as actually as a fail of leadership within everybody. Because remember, leadership's an action, it's a verb, not a noun. And so what you can do in that case is start to talk to other people in the group and say, hey, I've noticed that we keep, pulling in different directions here. I've noticed that we're having these conflicts, and I really want to, I imagine we're all trying to get this better outcome. We're all trying to do great work together. So I think when we're pulling in different directions, it really makes it difficult for us to all work at our best and get the outcomes we all want. And so I want us to sit down and maybe see how we can change the way we do things to get more alignment in the way that we're going. And again, this is a conversation. You might notice that I just use the feedback model in that example as well. But within the group, having those conversations about the tension, not hiding it, not pretending it's going to get fixed by someone else or waiting for someone up high to swoop down to fix it all for us, but just taking some control in that and having the conversations. Often, if you're feeling the tension, so are they. If you're feeling like you're getting held back, well, they'll feel it as well. And so my suggestion there would be just start by getting close to them and having the chat. The other little tip in here, Tom, and this goes for a lot of different scenarios, when we are trying to talk to someone about something like a conflict, what we tend to do as humans is we start by talking about the difference. So a common one at the moment is work from home, right? And so I've seen people go, oh, I really want my people to keep work from home. My boss is saying, no, they all need to be back in the office. And
So you go and talk to them and you start with, oh, look, I think your work from home policy is wrong. Now, if I start there, what am I initially setting up? I'm setting up a conflict. I'm setting up a battle, aren't I? And the other person knows it, so they draw battle lines, we dig trenches and throw rocks at each other. Instead, start with the bridge. Start with the thing we both want. So if I went to my boss and said, hey, I know you really want you need my team to be driving really hard and getting super high productivity. I want that as well. And I've done a lot of work to understand when my people are at their best. And what I've seen is they're at their best when they work from home. So starting at the bridge is really critical there. But happy to help, reach out if you need to for anything else, Tom. All right, team, I think we're just about out of time. That went fast, didn't it? I think so, Matthew. You can watch it back. That's a question for Ian in terms of getting the recording and all those things.
I can pick up there. I'll go straight into it because we've got a couple minutes left. First of all, Daniel, thank you so very, very much. What an awesome session. Dan has actually spoken for us quite a few times at our mainstream conference and gets in the top ratings. And it's not the technical maintenance, topics that rate highly. It's the people stuff. It's this stuff that makes all your investments and processes and technology and strategy work. So I'm sure you've learned a lot from this, got a lot out of it. I certainly have. So Dan, a massive thank you for sharing and waking people up and giving some great tips. Absolutely awesome. To all of you here, thank you so much for joining. I'm sure you're delighted you joined, considering you've got a week left to that crazy Christmas break time. There are many of you here who've actually been to mainstream, so you may even have heard Dan. I know Anton's here, Dennis, Cole, James, Matt. I know you've all been to mainstream, so awesome to have you here. I saw you through the call. To everybody here, so what we're going to do now is in the chat to get access to this recording, and if you wanted to share it with other people in your team, or you just want to go through it again, and parts you liked, we're going to put in the chat what you've got to do. We've built we have created a platform, a hub for everyone to come to, where you will get more masterclasses like this. You will get podcasts. You will get access to each other. You'll also get access to other people in the community. We've got lots of great people in this community. So Ian, do you want to put on the chat this link to join the community, where you'll be able to access Dan's session today and all the other sessions we've had in the past? We've had some great stuff. So you're going to like it. We'd love to have
in there now, Lise. In there now. So if you're in there now. Have a look, folks.
Okay. Perfect. So when you're ready, jump onto that. And in the meantime, we wish you all a fantastic break. Keep healthy and well, and keep, what's the word, Dan, you want to end with, making an impact on the people around you and for yourself. It'll probably have a very positive impact, won't it, Dan, when you practice these things and you get the wins, and you'll grow yourself. So, and how you turn up. So there you go. To everybody, thank you so much. And Dan, a huge thank you to you. And
my pleasure. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. See you soon.
Thanks, Daniel.
Cheers,
Bye.
folks. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Wonderful.
Have a great day,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys. Thanks, everyone.